You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, today we have a repeat guest on the podcast, Berk Temuroğlu. And Berk made a guest appearance here on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Then we asked him back for a follow-up episode, and he graciously agreed to join us again. For those of you who were not present for the last episode, so Berk lives in Prague. His professional background has been working in retail and FMCG companies. And for those of you who are not familiar with the abbreviation, FMCG is fast-moving consumer goods. Berk, did I get that right? Fast-moving consumer goods?
Spot on, Matt.
Excellent. Berk is currently commercial operations director for a major global company. He's also run a startup of his own, and he currently mentors startups. So he brings to today's topic multiple perspectives, both sides of the table, I guess you could say. In the first episode, Berk talked about a handful of things, namely the back and forth communication between startup founders and the corporate world, the importance of the problem solution cycle in communications, and the role of risk in making investment decisions. When we asked him back for a follow-up, it was because we just couldn't pass up such a golden opportunity to hear him talk about something that many of our customers and listeners are burning to hear about, which is how a startup, having conquered the world of domestic sales, can break into international markets. But we'll get to that in a second. In the meantime, thank you for coming back on the podcast, Berk. It's a real pleasure to have you back here with us again.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Alper. The pleasure is all mine.
And I like that expression, the world of domestic sales.
the world
it's like,
of domestic
it's like Flat Earth Society. We have members all around the globe.
Yeah. And Berk, before we get into today's topic, before I forget, tell our listeners if they want to get in touch with you, where can they email you, or how can they find you?
I think LinkedIn would be the best way to get in touch with me. I'm quite active, so if anyone would like to reach out, I would be really, really delighted.
Okay. And we've got a lot on our plate today, so let's dive in. Berk, you mentioned the wheel of engagement, but you also mentioned something before that, before the podcast. So take it away. What would you like to talk about first?
Market expansion. Market expansion is a very interesting topic, and like we discussed a while back, we can talk for hours and hours and hours, and we would still not be able to cover everything. But for today, what I can say right off the bat is market expansion is a precision exercise in terms of timing. But of course, it's easier said than done, of course. There are a lot of things to consider, and there is no single truth or formula to follow. That's why market expansion or go-to-market strategies are so important. But before and foremost, let's start by saying or underlining, highlighting that market expansion is definitely more art than science, because there are way too many variables to consider. And I don't know if you're gonna go deeper on that, but the most important variable is the industry, of course, or the line of business that the company operates in. I'm sure you would agree that it is impossible to follow the same formula of success for, let's say, a company operating in financial services as a fintech, and a company operating in consumer goods business as a retailer. This is obvious, but still, I think it's worth to be mentioned.
Sure.
That is actually pretty much in line with what I had on my mind to ask first. I would ask you, for example, what would be the key factors for the startups to consider? What are the things that they should lay on the table before even making any move to expand into international markets?
In every market, Alper, I mean, you start from zero. Of course, some startups, due to the nature of their business model, they have an advantage. Take, I don't know, TransferWise. I think they have changed their name to Wise right now. I'm
Yeah,
also a
Sure.
good customer of their.
Hmm.
By default, from the moment of inception, you start operating in multiple markets because you are a cross-border business, and there is the network effect of each transaction. But if we take a more conventional startup selling, let's say, again, consumer goods, which may need production, storage, etc., or if you are selling a service that requires assets from the market that you're expanding to, of course, the list of considerations can be a long one. There can be regulatory issues to be considered, legal, commercial for sure, human resources, human capital issues, etc. But still, even for a software startup targeting developers, uh, this list can be valid as well. I think it very much varies depending on the line of business and the industry that the startup actually operates in.
Berk, can you talk a little bit also about the human resources side of it? Are is sales success for a given employee, is sales success in one market an indicator of sales success in a future market?
Are we talking about with regards to the let's say team dynamics and team capabilities, etc., or are we talking in general, Matt? Can you
Oh,
lead
good
me a little
question.
bit on
Good
that?
question. Yeah, let's make it a little more specific then. Let's talk about the individual dynamics. And for example, we've got, let's say, for example, a sales team in software as a service, a SaaS startup, and they've been very successful in their domestic market. The team has been very successful in the domestic market in Turkey, and they've got some standout players in the domestic market in Turkey, and they're saying, hey, in this domestic market in Turkey, this Turkish person has been a standout in Turkey, and now we're moving to another country, let's say Czech Republic, for example. We're moving to another country, and we're just going to take our top players in Turkey and hope that they're going to be top players in the Czech Republic too.
I see. I wish I could say that it's as easy as it might sound. But
Okay.
what I witnessed, not personally experienced, but what I witnessed many times, is that the best players in, let's say, market A may not be the best
Mm-hmm.
players in market B as well, because it very much
Okay.
depends on their background, on how what they have experienced, how they have gained their
Mm.
capabilities, how
Okay.
their if their networking style, their relationship style actually is in line with the market that's expanded to, etc. This can go on and on and on. But of course,
Okay.
by all means, that's what every company does. Of course, whenever you're expanding into a new market, you would like to
Mm.
send your best players so that the success, the probability of success increases. But
Mm.
I do not believe that it's only about these players, because there is one thing that I have coined, at least as far as I know. I haven't heard anybody mentioning
Sure.
the same
Uh-huh.
expression or using the same term. There
Okay.
is something that I call the wheel of engagement.
Ah, okay.
If that's okay, I can talk a little bit about that, because it's not only
Yeah,
on
please.
the individuals, but as a startup as a whole, and of course, individuals in the startup as a part of it are a part of it.
Yeah.
So it might maybe be relatable for the audience as well.
Oh, definitely. So, please tell us about this phrase, the wheel of engagement, and What do you mean by that?
What I mean by wheel of engagement. Well, in every startup, of course, at the moment of inception, the job is exciting. But then, for a certain period, it becomes boring. Sometimes because you run out of assumptions to invalidate, because market research is very, very important in every startup and in every market expansion. Sometimes you don't have the resources to do what you need to do, and so on and so on. Then, when you somewhat succeed, for a long, long time, the job evolves into an extreme difficulty and hardship, because scaling is all about hardship. I think we all agree with that. But then, as the name suggests, it's a wheel of engagement. Then the job becomes exciting again, because you probably find the product market fit, etc., etc. This is a never-ending cycle as long as the startup continues to exist. Of course, the duration of these periods change, but the cycle always exists. And again, as long as the startup exists, of course.
So tell us more about this. Let's back up a second to this stage that you mentioned that's kind of boring. This is an interesting word that you used to describe it. Tell us more about this cycle and what makes it boring. What's going on during this time?
What happens is startups operate based on assumptions and imperfect information. It's a game of trial and error, if I may say. And designing go-to-market strategies, expansion plans, and planning for months can consume significant time. So what happens is sometimes startups choose to go the route of planning, and planning and startups really don't mix well, or they become a distraction. A distraction, especially knowing that the market will likely invalidate these plans pretty quickly. So months-long planning takes away from learning. And when you find yourself in a situation as a person who's working at a startup, or as a whole, as the whole startup, let's say a group of 50 people, when the learning slows down, it starts to become a little bit boring, because startups are all about, as I'm sure we would all agree, fail if you must, but fail fast mentality has to be there all the time.
Sure. So let me see if I'm following you correctly. So this period of boredom. First, initially, there's excitement. Hey, everybody, we're successful in Turkey and we're going to the Czech Republic. Life is going to be great. We're international now. That's the period of excitement. And then this period of boredom comes where you're like, oh, we've got to plan stuff and we've got to go through this non-startup-like experience. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Because the startups, I mean, due to the nature of the startup, these periods, these engagement, let's say periods, the whole company experiences the periods, let's say, in unity as a whole, all together. All together. Starting from employee number 1 all the way to employee number 50. But interestingly, if I may connect the dots here, in the startup world, each market expansion actually, Matt, if you ask me, should be happening during the period what I referred to as boring earlier. Because there is so much going on in the first and in the third one, the excitement period and the hardship period. But the boring period is the best time actually to do the market expansion. But of course, keeping this exact timing is almost impossible. You have competition, you have investors that want results pronto, or simply an opportunity in another market presents itself out of the blue, etc., etc. So unfortunately, in most of the cases that I have witnessed, market expansion takes place in the long and lingering periods of extreme difficulty and hardship. rather than boredom.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
the moment growth stalls, extreme difficulty and hardship period begins. And
Mhm.
if the difficulty and hardship period persist for too long, the startup, in most cases, of course, the founder decides to expand to another market to keep
Mhm.
the notion of growth somewhat alive.
Okay. And Alper, I don't want to hog all the questions here. So, do you have anything that you would like to jump in with at this point?
Yeah, I have a question, and I think I first of all, I liked how Berk you described the startup being about assumptions and trying to invalidate them. My question is, I think in the middle of this boring period when the decision is played with, let's say, to expand, and now we're going to approach a new market. I would like to ask you if you have any suggestions for startups, like how should they approach market research and analysis when they are during this boredom period, and they want to evaluate potential opportunities outside their home country.
Um, Alper, what I could say first is the fastest way to learn. And again, I already said that startups are all about learning, but the fastest way to learn involves seeking to invalidate, not validate, invalidate parts of the vision.
Yes.
Yeah, and unlocking this product market fit or the problem solution fit, as we said in the previous episode, is a game of refinement and, most importantly, subtraction. This is not a process which involves addition, but on the contrary, it's all about subtraction, treating each activity and interaction as an experiment that invalidates your assumptions. So this approach actually reframes rejection from the market into a positive by eliminating non-viable paths and clarifying those that show promise. So market rejection for a startup is not a failure. It's not even a setback. I mean, if they, especially have enough funding, it's something that brings them closer to discovering the market's truth. But the issue is, if you have the conviction as a founder or as a startup member, if you have the conviction that your invalidated or even validated assumptions in market A are the absolute truth, you may end up with too many battle wounds in the new battleground, meaning
Mhm.
market B.
Yes.
Um, let's say a general not taking the terrain of the battlefield into consideration will most likely fail. You can't take the learnings and tactics of desert warfare to a jungle. I'm sure we would all agree. But yet, both the world history and the startup world are full of these mistakes. But of course, there is always somewhat a recipe which you can follow, and the recipe can be very long. But if I have to name a few,
Mhm.
That would be great. Yeah.
number one, I would say electing one person to be the lead experimenter. As with everything, there must be clear ownership over the process and the results in terms of this invalidation or subtraction process. Because each additional person in the mix introduces a variable, and each variable creates more noise, and this noise really becomes a huge distraction and keeps you away from getting to the market's truth. That's for sure.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
would be number one.
And let's stay on that for a moment. So
I have a
this one
question
person.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, who should this one person be? Is there a typically good best candidate for who fills this one position?
This would be, I think, if you go back to your earlier or initial question about your, let's say, superstars or your high
Mhm.
potentials or however you call them, the ones that you
Okay.
definitely rely on for
Sure.
this market expansion. I think the
Mhm.
obvious answer would be one of those people. But sometimes, on the contrary, it still needs to be the founder. Again, it very much depends on the industry that the startup operates in, or the line of business that the startup is actually in, has a huge role to play in this decision. And it can definitely make a huge difference. The person that you choose will definitely make a huge difference in terms of market expansion success or not.
Okay.
And I was going to say something along the lines of that as well. I asked something along the lines of that as well. Should it be the founder? Should it be the person with the most skin in the game? Because sometimes the founder may take an honest stock of his or her capabilities and realize that, hey, my success was about bringing this company up to this point, but expansion is a whole different animal, and I may need to pave the way for more capable team members to walk that road.
If I may, Alper, you are definitely right with your assumptions. But on the other side, or let's say the flip side on this, is every market expansion you start from zero. So again, if you are operating in an environment, or if you're a startup that sells high-touch products or services, what I mean by high-touch is highly customizable, long sales cycles, etc., which is not very, let's say, marketing-led, but more sales-led, then at least what I witness is that if the founder is still there, being the lead experimenter, it works out much better. But again, it very much depends. It's all relative. That's why I said what I said earlier. This is more art than science, unfortunately. And in most cases, the founder needs to make the right call. And sometimes you just go with your gut feeling, because there isn't any data fact that you can rely on, whether it should be you or some other team member that you have in the team.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We will take a break at this point and continue our conversation in our next episode. Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosales. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.